We two souls bound in a single form, Orson and Silas Thorne, have always been seen as peculiar. Since childhood, we felt the weight of every gaze, but nothing has ever cut deeper than the wounds inflicted by our own son. He, Kalen, who once swore to care for us, one day slammed the door and spat, "Get out, you useless old men!" I remember the bitter chill of that October 2023 night, our shared heart thudding in unison. The pain multiplied, not just because there were two of us, but because we were fathers. Days later, discharged from Westridge Community Hospital, our 72-year-old bodies still heavy with anesthetic and lingering weakness from the recent procedure, we finally returned to the Thorne homestead. The exhaustion was a dull ache, but it was quickly overshadowed by a sharper, more visceral shock. Our meager belongings, our lives, were strewn across the damp sidewalk. Memory boxes, overflowing with old photographs and brittle letters, lay open, their contents spilling into undignified puddles. Through the grimy window of our once welcoming Victorian home, we saw Bryony Thorne, Kalen's 42-year-old wife, sleek Bob perfectly still, laughing into her phone, pretending not to notice Orson and Silas, standing abandoned on our own porch. The house, our home for 6 decades, stood eerily empty, a hollow shell. She didn't have to say a word. The message was loud and clear. Then Kalen Thorne, 45, appeared, his imposing figure filling the doorway, his face a mask of contempt. "What are you doing here, you old parasites? I told you to leave. Everything's sold. You're nothing but freaks, conjoined aberrations who never contributed a damn thing." He sneered, his words like daggers. The physical bond that tied us together often meant shared physical pain, but this betrayal was a singular agony, a wound to the soul that resonated uniquely in each of us. The humiliation was absolute, a public display of our perceived worthlessness. But even as our shared heart quaked with grief and rage, a spark of defiance ignited. We may be bound, but we are not broken. Our life has been a testament to resilience, to enduring judgment and overcoming limitations. Orson caught Silas's eye, a silent understanding passing between us. We wouldn't just disappear. We would document every cruel word, every discarded possession, every piece of this calculated destruction in the rustic leather journal. We would expose the heartless abandonment, not just for ourselves, but for every aberration, every useless old man dismissed and cast aside. Our story, etched in betrayal, would become a testament to the unyielding spirit of two brothers. Forever bound, forever fighting. Our story, etched in betrayal, would become a testament to the unyielding spirit of two brothers. Forever bound, forever fighting. The words hung in the damp October air, sharp and bitter. Kalen's sneer was a physical blow, reverberating through our shared nervous system. Orson felt a tremor run through his lean frame, a familiar protest from muscles already screaming from the hospital's sterile confines. Silas, the broader of us, felt his own heart hammer against his ribs, a drumbeat of fury rising to meet the pain. We stood there, rooted by our shared bond and the sheer disbelief, the rain-slicked pavement reflecting the pale, unforgiving sky. The Thorne homestead, once a beacon of warmth and stability, now loomed behind Kalen like a hostile gargoyle. Its Victorian details faded, its unkempt gardens a testament to neglect. The tall grass swayed, a mournful whisper against the silence that followed Kalen's outburst. Bryony Thorne, Kalen's 42-year-old wife, still by the window, lowered her phone, her thin, unconvincing smile faltering only slightly as she registered the shift in Kalen's tone. Her eyes, cool and dismissive, flickered over us for a fraction of a second, an acknowledgement of our presence that felt colder than any outright insult. She didn't speak, but her silence, her deliberate turning away to pick at a perfectly manicured nail, spoke volumes. It was a calculated performance, a pantomime of indifference that amplified the ache in our shared chest. "Did you not hear me, old man?" Kalen's voice cut through the heavy air, laced with a venomous impatience. He stepped forward, out of the doorway's shadow and into the dim light, his imposing figure casting a long, distorted shadow over our scattered lives. Everything sold. The house, the land, all of it. Gone. You've got no claim here. Never did. You were just squatters. He gestured dismissively at the pathetic pile of our memory boxes, some of them ripped open, spilling decades of photographs and brittle letters onto the wet concrete. A small handcrafted wooden bird carved by our father lay broken amidst a cluster of yellowed baby clothes. It was Orson's favorite, a tangible link to a happier past, now splintered and worthless. Silas felt a surge of rage so potent it almost buckled our knees. Squatters, he rasped, his voice raw, hoarse from disuse and the lingering anesthetic. This is our home, Kalen. Our father built this house. We were born here. You were born here. The effort of speaking, of forcing the words past the lump in our throat, sent a fresh wave of dizziness through us. Orson leaned heavily on his side, his arm instinctively reaching out, though there was nothing to brace against but Silas. Kalen laughed, a harsh, humorless sound that scraped against our ears. Oh, poor old sentimental fools. Don't you understand how the world works? Your relics. Anachronisms. This isn't a museum for your freakish existence. This is prime real estate. And it's mine. My future. Something you two conjoined aberrations never understood. He kicked lightly at one of the memory boxes, sending a cascade of faded postcards skittering across the sidewalk. You think your little trinkets mean something? They're junk, just like you. The insult, delivered with such casual cruelty, stripped away another layer of our dignity. The physical bond that kept us together often meant we shared sensations, a common ache, a synchronized shiver. But this deep, gnawing wound of betrayal resonated uniquely within each of us, even as it unified our pain. Orson felt a cold despair beginning to settle, a crushing weight that threatened to extinguish the spark of defiance. Silas, however, felt the heat of his anger intensifying, hardening into something cold and resolute. Our shared gait, usually slow and deliberate, felt impossibly heavy. Each movement, each shift of weight, sent a dull throb through our lower torso, the recent medical procedure a constant, unwelcome reminder of our vulnerability. The hospital discharge had come with strict instructions for rest, for gentle movements. Now every muscle protested, every joint screamed in protest. The dampness seeped through our thin clothes, adding to the chill that went bone deep. We were two old men recovering, exhausted, and now publicly dispossessed. Bryony, as if sensing the moment of our greatest vulnerability, finally moved. She stepped out onto the porch, her sleek bob haircut perfectly framing her impassive face. Her movements were fluid, self-assured, designed to maintain distance. She held a small, delicate vase in her hand, one of the few items that had not been thrown onto the sidewalk, clearly something she considered salvageable. As she passed Kalen, she offered a fleeting, almost imperceptible smirk. Honestly, Kalen, don't you have something important to do? This is just tacky. Leave them to their melodrama. The buyers will be here soon. Her words, though aimed at Kalen, were a fresh cut to us. We were not just dispossessed. We were an inconvenience, a melodrama to be tidied away before the important people arrived. The vase, our mother's wedding gift, a delicate piece of frosted glass that had always held the first spring blossoms from the garden, now clutched in Bryony's pristine hand, felt like a desecration. It was a tangible piece of our family's history, something we had lovingly preserved, now appropriated and deemed worthy only by her arbitrary standards. Kalen, emboldened by Bryony's presence, took another step towards us, invading our already strained personal space. See, even she knows. You're holding up progress. You never contributed anything. You just existed. A drain, a burden. Always had to be accommodated. Always had special needs. Well, no more. The world doesn't owe you a damn thing, you useless old men. Get out. Now. He pointed a finger, thick and accusing, directly at our shared face, his eyes cold and devoid of any recognition of us as his father's. The rage that had been simmering within Silas finally reached a boiling point, threatening to consume us both. He felt a powerful urge to strike out, to lash back, to inflict a fraction of the pain Kaylin was so casually dispensing. But Orson, always the more measured, the more outwardly calm, exerted a subtle, almost imperceptible pressure on Silas' side, a silent plea for restraint. It was a familiar dance between us, Orson's quiet strength tempering Silas' fiery indignation. We were bound, not just by flesh, but by a lifetime of anticipating and balancing each other's reactions. Orson, his voice quiet but steady, managed to say, "We just got out of the hospital, Kaylin. We're weak. Where are we supposed to go?" The question was not a plea for mercy, but a simple statement of fact, an attempt to inject a shred of reality into. The storm of his son's contempt. Kaylin scoffed. "Not my problem. You found a way to drag yourselves back here, you'll find a way to drag yourselves somewhere else. Maybe that decrepit old community center down the road will take you in. They're used to dealing with oddities." He laughed again, a cruel echoing sound that bounced off the decaying porch. "Or maybe you can finally contribute something useful to society. Be a roadside attraction. People always pay to see the freaks, don't they?" This was the climax. The insult wasn't just about our physical state or our home or our past. It was about our very identity, our existence, stripped down to a spectacle. The casual suggestion of exploiting our condition, turning our lives into a sideshow, was the ultimate humiliation. It was designed to crush us, to render us utterly worthless and without agency. But it didn't. Instead, it was like a cold, sharp shock that galvanized us. Orson felt a deep, almost primal defiance surge within him, a countercurrent to the despair. Silas felt the last vestiges of raw, uncontrolled anger transmute into a steely resolve. Our shared heart, which moments ago had thudded with grief and rage, now beat with a fierce, unwavering determination. We looked at each other again, a longer, deeper gaze this time. The silent understanding was no longer a nascent spark. It was a roaring flame. "We will not be a sideshow," Silas stated, his voice still hoarse, but now imbued with an unshakable conviction. Orson nodded, his gaze unwavering as he met Kaylin's dismissive stare. "We will not be erased." Kaylin, momentarily taken aback by the sudden shift in our demeanor, scoffed again. "Oh, listen to the old men. Still got some fight left, do you? Pitiful." He rolled his eyes, turning to Bryony. "See what I mean? Always a performance." But we no longer heard him. Or rather, his words became background noise, insignificant static against the roar of our renewed purpose. Our eyes swept over the scattered remnants of our lives. The memory boxes, the broken wooden bird, the personal effects now just damp refuse. Each item, each photograph, each crumpled letter represented a story, a memory, a piece of the lives we had built, against all odds. These were not just objects. They were our witnesses. With a concerted effort, a silent agreement passing between us, we began to move. It was slow, arduous work. Our 72-year-old bodies, still weakened from the procedure, protested with every strained muscle and aching joint. The unique, often strained gait that had defined our lives became even more pronounced as we navigated the uneven sidewalk, careful not to stumble. Orson, ever deliberate, leaned forward, providing stability as Silas, with his broader build, reached out. Our shared hands, though clumsy together, carefully picked up a sodden photograph of our parents, young and smiling, standing on this very porch. Then, a worn letter, its ink bleeding slightly from the moisture, a cherished note from a childhood friend. Kaylin watched, a mixture of annoyance and something akin to bewilderment on his face. Bryony, still on the porch, shook her head, a soft, exasperated sound escaping her lips. They expected us to crumble, to slink away. They expected us to accept our fate as discarded freaks. But they underestimated the resilience forged in 6 decades of enduring judgment and overcoming limitations. We moved towards the rustic leather journal, which lay half-buried beneath a pile of old linens, miraculously spared from the worst of the rain. Orson bent, his hands shaking slightly from the effort, and retrieved it. Its worn cover felt solid, reassuring in our grasp. It was more than just a notebook. It was our shield, our weapon. Silas looked up at Kaylin. his deep-set eyes, usually fiery, now burning with a cold, clear light. "You think you've ended us, Kalen," he said, his voice stronger now, resonating with a newfound authority. "But you've only just begun our story, and we will make sure the world hears it." Kalen merely scoffed, turning away with an air of finality, dismissing our words as the ramblings of old, defeated men. He and Bryony retreated into the empty shell of our home, the door slamming shut with a resounding thud that echoed through the hollow space. We heard the distinct click of the lock, sealing us out, but the sound didn't break us. It merely solidified our resolve. We stood there, conjoined, exhausted, humiliated, but unbroken. With the rustic leather journal clutched firmly in our shared grasp, we looked at the dilapidated Thorne homestead, at the scattered remnants of our lives, and then at each other. The rain began to fall harder, washing away the dirt and grime from the sidewalk, but it would never wash away the truth. We had a story to tell, a betrayal to expose, and a lifetime of resilience to draw upon. Our fight had only just begun. We would begin by documenting every cruel word, every discarded possession, every piece of this calculated destruction, ensuring that Kalen Thorne's heartless abandonment would be brought to light, not just for ourselves, but for every aberration, every useless old man dismissed and cast aside, the cold, wet world pressed in around us. The Thorne homestead, now a symbol of utter betrayal, stood dark and impenetrable behind the freshly slammed door. The distinct click of the lock had been a final, definitive period on a sentence we never thought we'd read. Kalen and Bryony were inside, safe and warm, preparing for their new life. We were outside, exposed, adrift, our 72 years of shared existence reduced to a pile of damp refuse on a rain-slicked sidewalk. Orson felt a shiver run through his lean frame, not just from the biting October wind, but from the deep internal chill of abandonment. His chest ached, a phantom pain mirroring the literal ache of his healing body. Silas beside him felt it too, the cold, the pain, the profound sense of being utterly alone in a world that had suddenly turned hostile. Our unique gait, usually a testament to our coordinated effort, now felt like a desperate shuffle, each movement a laborious act of defiance against the exhaustion that threatened to pull us down. "We need to get out of this rain," Orson murmured, his voice hoarse, barely audible over the increasing patter of the droplets on the pavement. He tightened his grip on the rustic leather journal, its worn cover feeling both substantial and strangely fragile in our shared hands. This small brown book was our anchor, our shield, our only weapon against the overwhelming tide of despair. Silas nodded, his gaze sweeping over the chaotic tableau of our former life. Memory boxes, now just sodden cardboard, lay torn open, spilling their contents. A child's faded crayon drawing of a lopsided house, Kalen's first masterpiece, was now smeared with mud. Our father's pipe, carefully preserved, lay broken. A small porcelain music box, a gift from our mother, lay shattered, its delicate tune forever silenced. Each object was a sharp, physical jab to our already wounded hearts. Under the porch overhang, Silas directed, his voice raspy, but imbued with a steely edge that Orson recognized as his brother's resolve hardening. "It's not much, but it's something." The short distance to the porch felt like a mile. Every step was a battle. Our muscles screamed, protesting the exertion. The recent medical procedure had left us weak, vulnerable, our lower torso still tender and throbbing. The doctors at Westridge Community Hospital had warned us against strenuous activity, against stress. This, our current predicament, was a brutal mockery of their clinical advice. Each labored breath was a testament to our will, to the defiant refusal to simply collapse. We reached the limited shelter of the porch, huddling close to the wall, trying to press ourselves out of the worst of the rain. The dampness clung to our clothes, seeping into our skin, chilling us to the bone. Orson carefully sat down, bracing himself with one hand against the rough wood of the porch pillar. Silas, adjusting his broader frame, settled beside him, our shared body a single unit of exhaustion and simmering indignation. The first task was clear: to document, to begin the story that Kaylin and Bryony believed they had silenced. Orson carefully opened the journal, the leather creaking softly in protest. The pages, aged and slightly yellowed, offered a blank canvas for our truth. October 2023, Orson dictated, his voice a low rumble. The day our son, Kaylin, expelled us from our home. The Thorne homestead, our birthright, his inheritance, stolen before its time, then sold for profit. He called us useless old men. Conjoined aberrations. Freaks. Orson's hand, guided by Silas's steadying presence, began to write, the pen scratching faintly on the paper. Each word was a tiny act of reclamation, a brick laid in the foundation of our fight. Silas looked out at the rain-soaked lawn, at the unkempt gardens, once a source of immense pride for us. Mother had loved her roses, and we had spent countless hours tending them, our synchronized movements a familiar ballet of pruning and weeding. Now the rose bushes were overgrown, choked with weeds, their bare thorns reaching out like skeletal fingers. And Bryony, Silas added, his voice laced with disgust, laughing, ignoring us, treating us like an inconvenience, like a melodrama to be cleaned up before the buyers arrived. She took Mother's vase, the frosted glass one, the one that always held the first spring blossoms. Orson wrote, his jaw tight. The act of writing down the cruelty, of giving it tangible form, made it more real, more painful, yet also oddly empowering. It was a formal acknowledgement of the wound, a commitment to healing through exposure. We paused, our shared gaze drifting to the heap of our belongings. It was more than just junk. It was the physical manifestation of our lives. The photographs, now dissolving into mush, were moments frozen in time. Our parents on their wedding day, faces beaming. Us as awkward boys, inseparable even then, standing proudly beside a prize-winning pumpkin from the garden. Kaylin as a baby, swaddled in a blue blanket, his tiny fist gripping Orson's finger, his innocent eyes wide with wonder. The stark contrast between those tender memories and Kaylin's current contempt was a brutal blow. He said we never contributed anything, Orson muttered, the pen momentarily still in his hand. Never understood how the world works. Called us squatters. A bitter laugh escaped our shared chest, a sound devoid of humor. Squatters in our own home, in the house our father built with his own hands, where 3 generations of Thornes have lived and died. Silas leaned his head back against the cold wood, closing his eyes for a moment. He knew what this place meant to us. He grew up here. He knows the stories in these walls, the echoes of laughter, the comfort of routine. He chose to ignore them all. A wave of dizziness washed over us, a stark reminder of our fragility. The hospital, with its sterile efficiency, seemed a distant, almost forgotten memory. Discharged, sent out into the world, only to find the world had no place for us. We had spent days in the Westridge Community Hospital. The official diagnosis had been complications arising from pre-existing conditions, but we knew the truth. The stress of Kaylin's initial expulsion, his vicious words, had been a poison. Our unique physiology meant that emotional distress often manifested physically, exacerbating our shared vulnerabilities. Orson's thoughtful endurance and Silas's fiery indignation often converged into a unified physical response, a shared weakness that amplified the pain. We had emerged from that hospital bed, bodies heavy with anesthetic and lingering weakness, clinging to the faint hope that Kaylin's rage had cooled. We had been fools, and now here we were, our worst fears realized. The house, our sanctuary, our legacy sold. Our memories desecrated, our identity attacked. He wants us to disappear, Silas said, opening his eyes, a fierce light burning in their depths. He wants us to be ashamed, to be invisible, to accept that we are useless old men and freaks. But we are not, Orson replied, his voice firm, his grip on the journal tightening. He resumed writing, documenting Kaylin's exact words, his sneer, Bryony's cold indifference. He described the rain, the cold, the way our bodies trembled with exertion and lingering weakness. He detailed the broken wooden bird, Kalen's first drawing, the shattered music box, each an indictment. The thought of our son, who as a boy would sit between us on the porch swing, listening to our stories, learning to carve with our father's tools, brought a fresh wave of grief. Kalen had been a bright child, curious, quick to laugh. Where had that boy gone? When did the kindness turn to contempt? The transformation was unfathomable, a betrayal of blood that cut deeper than any stranger's scorn. We remembered the night he had slammed the door, calling us useless old men. The bitter chill of that night had been nothing compared to the desolation we felt now. Our shared heart had thudded in unison then. The pain multiplied, not just because there were two of us, but because we were fathers, cast aside by our own flesh and blood. That night we had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. We had wandered seeking shelter, our physical limitations a constant, agonizing reminder of our vulnerability. The exhaustion had led us to the hospital, where the nurses, with their practiced distant kindness, had been the only comfort. But even there, the gnawing anxiety of what Kalen might do, what he had done, had lingered. Silas leaned forward, his eyes scanning the rain-swept yard. We need to collect what we can, not for sentimental value, not anymore, for evidence. His voice was low, resolute. Every piece of this calculated destruction, every discarded possession, we will document it all. The task seemed monumental given our weakened state. Our unique connection meant that when one of us felt a sharp pain, the other experienced a resonant ache. The strain on our lower torso, where we were conjoined, was constant, amplified by the cold and the arduous movements. But the resolve burning within us was stronger than the pain. Slowly, carefully, we began to salvage. Orson guided our shared hands, while Silas stretched his broader reach. The rustic leather journal lay open beside us, its pages ready to receive the inventory of our loss. We picked up a stack of letters, bound with a faded ribbon, correspondence between our parents during the war. Then a small silver locket, containing a tiny, almost indistinguishable photo of our grandmother. Each item retrieved was a tiny victory against the tide of Kalen's destruction. The rain continued, relentless, blurring the lines between past and present, between our grief and our burgeoning anger. Bryony's impudent smirk, Kalen's cruel laughter, they replayed in our minds, fueling our determination. They wanted us to disappear, to be swallowed by the anonymity of the discarded. But we would not. We had lived our lives under the scrutiny of countless gazes, endured whispers and stares, learned to navigate a world not designed for two souls bound in one form. This, the betrayal of a son, was a new, deeper wound, but it would not break us. It would instead forge us anew. We carefully dried the items we could, tucking them inside a relatively dry, albeit crushed, memory box. The journal became our constant companion, each entry a deliberate act of defiance. We documented the precise time Kalen had made his threats, the specific insults, the callous disregard for our physical condition. We described Bryony's pristine appearance, her unconvincing smile, her calculated aloofness. Every detail, however small, was vital. As the afternoon waned, the light began to fade, casting long, distorted shadows across the now desolate homestead. The empty windows of the house stared back at us like vacant eyes. We were still outside, still cold, still exhausted, but something fundamental had shifted within us. The initial shock and humiliation had given way to a quiet, burning resolve. "We will expose this," Orson murmured, his voice firm, his gaze fixed on the house. Not just for ourselves, but for every aberration, every useless old man dismissed and cast aside. Silas nodded, a profound sense of purpose settling over our shared being. The pain in our bodies was still present, a dull throb, but it was now a backdrop to a fiercer, more powerful emotion. We were no longer just victims. We were witnesses, and we were determined to make our testimony heard. The rustic leather journal, now filled with the first painful entries of our ordeal, felt like a sacred trust. Our story, etched in betrayal, would indeed become a testament to the unyielding spirit of two brothers, forever bound, forever fighting. We knew the path ahead would be long and arduous, fraught with more pain and more struggle. But as we sat there, huddled together on the porch of our lost home, the chilling October wind whipping around us, we also knew that we would not walk it alone. We would walk it together, as we always had, each step a testament to our unbreakable bond and our unyielding spirit. Our voices, once silenced by scorn, would now echo with a strength forged in fire, telling a story that demanded to be heard. We, two souls bound in a single form, have always been seen as peculiar. Since childhood, we felt the weight of every gaze, but nothing has ever cut deeper than the wounds inflicted by our own son. He, Kalen, who once swore to care for us, one day slammed the door and spat, "Get out, you useless old men." We remember the bitter chill of that night, our shared heart thudding in unison, the pain multiplied, not just because there were two of us, but because we were fathers. Days later, the dull throb of anesthetic still lingering in our veins, we shuffled out of Westridge Community Hospital. The sterile air of the corridors had offered a peculiar comfort, a temporary shield from the harsh realities Kalen had thrown at us. Now the cool October breeze on our faces felt less like a relief and more like a cruel omen. Our bodies, still heavy with the lingering weakness of a recent medical procedure, moved with a slow, deliberate cadence, each step a small victory against the exhaustion that threatened to pull us down. Orson, usually the quieter of us, felt a knot of dread tighten in our shared chest. Silas, always the more volatile, could feel indignation simmering, ready to boil over. We clung to a desperate, foolish hope that Kalen's rage had cooled, that reason might have returned to him. We were about to be disabused of that notion with brutal clarity. The Thorne homestead, our home for 6 decades, loomed into view. It was not. The welcoming sight we had yearned for during our hospital confinement. Even from the street, we could tell something was terribly wrong. The once meticulously kept gardens, a source of immense pride for us, were a wilderness of high grass and untrimmed bushes. Our mother's roses, which we had tended with such care, were choked with weeds, their bare thorns reaching out like skeletal fingers. A shiver, not entirely from the cold, ran through our lean frame. As we rounded the corner to our front yard, the sight hit us like a physical blow. Our meager belongings, our lives, our memories, were not just misplaced. They were desecrated. Strewn across the damp sidewalk, a humiliating heap of shattered porcelain, mud-stained photographs, and crumpled paper, lay the physical remnants of our existence. Memory boxes, once guardians of precious moments, were torn open, their contents spilled for the world to see, soaking in the persistent drizzle. Our father's old pipe, a cherished keepsake, lay snapped in two. A small porcelain music box, a gift from our mother, lay shattered, its delicate mechanism exposed, its tune silenced forever. It was a public execution of our past, an undignified display of perceived worthlessness. A bitter, guttural sound escaped our shared throat. It was a mixture of grief and pure, unadulterated rage. Our unique gait, usually a testament to our coordinated effort, faltered. The pain in our lower torso, where we were conjoined, flared, a sharp, unwelcome reminder of our physical vulnerability, intensified by the emotional agony. We were standing abandoned on our own porch, our sanctuary, our birthright, now a stage for our public humiliation. Through the grimy front window, we saw her, Bryony. Her sleek bob haircut framed a face that was often impassive, bordering on condescending. But at this moment, it was alight with a cold, almost predatory amusement. She was laughing into her phone, her manicured hand gesturing vaguely towards our discarded lives on the pavement. She pretended not to notice us, Orson and Silas, standing there, 2 old men bound in one form, bewildered and broken. Her movements were fluid and self-assured, designed to avoid any interaction, any acknowledgement of our suffering. Her thin, unconvincing smile widened as she spoke, her voice muffled but her dismissive laughter echoing in our minds, twisting the knife Kaylin had already plunged into our shared heart. She took Mother's frosted glass vase, we remembered, the one that always held the first spring blossoms. The message was loud and clear. We were nothing. We were dust. We were an inconvenience to be cleaned up, our existence erased. Then, the front door swung open with a theatrical flourish, revealing Kaylin. He stood there, framed by the familiar entryway that was no longer ours, his imposing, well-built figure radiating an air of aggression. His face was a mask of contempt, his cold, dismissive eyes sweeping over us with an almost clinical disdain. His jaw was tight, his lips curled into a sneer that twisted his features into something ugly and unrecognizable. He was wearing practical, high-value clothing that subtly projected his self-importance, a stark contrast to our own damp, threadbare hospital clothes. "What are you doing here, you old parasites?" he spat, his voice sharp and laced with venom cutting through the damp air. His words were daggers, each one piercing deeper than the last. "I told you to leave. Everything's sold. You're nothing but freaks, conjoined aberrations who never contributed a damn thing." The world seemed to tilt. The physical bond that tied us together often meant shared physical pain, a common ache in our lower torso, a simultaneous weakness in our limbs. But this betrayal, this brutal, unprovoked assault from our own son, was a singular agony. It was a wound to the soul that resonated uniquely in each of us, yet multiplied its torment because we were two hearts sharing the same crushing blow. Orson's thoughtful endurance buckled under the weight of the insult, while Silas' fiery indignation threatened to consume us whole. "Sold?" Silas managed, the word a choked rasp from our shared throat. "What have you done, Kaylin? This is our home, our legacy." Kaylin scoffed, stepping onto the porch, his eyes burning with an almost triumphant malice. "Your home? Your legacy? You've been squatters here for years, draining resources, living off my good graces. You think anyone wants a house where two old men are permanently attached to each other? A freak show, that's what this place was becoming?" He gestured wildly at our shared form, his contempt palpable. "Look at yourselves, always dragging each other down. You never understood how the world works, did you? You never adapted. You were just aberrations, a burden, always a burden." Bryony, still on the phone, stifled a laugh, turning her back to us, pretending to be absorbed in her conversation. Her feigned indifference was almost as hurtful as Kaylin's open hostility. We remembered her as a young woman, timid and polite, marrying into our family. Now she was an accomplice, reveling in our downfall. "You called us useless old men before," Orson said, his voice trembling, but holding a surprising thread of steel. "Now freaks? Aberrations?" Kaylin laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "Well, what else are you? Conjoined at the hip, a medical marvel that should have stayed in a textbook. You think anyone cares about your contributions? You just took up space. You were always an embarrassment. Now finally you're out of my hair. The buyers are due next week. They want a clean slate. No old decrepit oddities hanging around." He emphasized the word oddities with a cruel smile, his eyes flashing with a cold satisfaction. "You've got nowhere to go. No one wants two old men in one package, especially not when they're so useless." The humiliation was absolute, a public display of our perceived worthlessness, intensified by the rain and the cold. Our shared heart quaked with grief and a rage so profound it threatened to overwhelm us. We stood there, our bodies aching, our spirits battered, facing the cruel indifference of our son, our own flesh and blood. Every insult, every sneer was etched onto our very being. The physical bond that united us became a vessel for amplified despair, each brother feeling the unique sting of the betrayal, while simultaneously enduring the reverberations in the other. But even as our shared heart quaked, even as the cold seeped into our bones, a spark of defiance ignited. It began as a tiny ember, deep within our shared spirit, a defiant refusal to be extinguished. We may be bound, but we are not broken. Our life has been a testament to resilience, to enduring judgment, and overcoming limitations. We had faced the stares, the whispers, the outright cruelty of strangers our entire lives. This from Kaylin was a new, deeper cut, but it would not be the final blow. We looked at each other, a silent understanding passing between us. Orson's thoughtful endurance met Silas's fiery indignation, and from their convergence, a new, steely resolve was forged. We wouldn't just disappear. We wouldn't simply fade into the anonymity of the discarded. Kaylin wanted us to vanish, to become a forgotten footnote in his newly acquired prosperity. But we would not. Silas, with a surprising surge of strength, guided our shared hands to the satchel we carried. Orson, understanding, fumbled for the rustic leather journal. Its worn cover, once merely a personal keepsake, now felt like a shield, a weapon. Its pages, aged and slightly yellowed, offered a blank canvas for our truth. "We will document every cruel word," Silas rasped, his voice low but fierce, a burning ember in the face of the storm. "Every discarded possession, every piece of this calculated destruction." Orson nodded, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on Kaylin, who was now turning back inside, dismissing us with a final wave of his hand. "We will expose the heartless abandonment, not just for ourselves, but for every aberration, every useless old man dismissed and cast aside." The pen felt heavy in our shared hand, yet purposeful. We began to write, the scratching of the nib on the page a small, defiant symphony against the relentless patter of the rain. We chronicled Kaylin's exact words, his sneering contempt, Bryony's cold, calculated indifference. We described the rain, the cold, the way our bodies trembled with exertion and lingering weakness. We cataloged the broken porcelain, the mud-stained photographs, the shattered music box, each a piece of evidence, each an indictment of our son's cruelty. The memories of Kaylin as a boy, a bright, curious child who would sit between us on the porch swing, listening to our stories, learning to carve with our father's tools, flooded our minds. Where had that boy gone? When did the kindness turn to such venomous contempt? The transformation was unfathomable, a betrayal of blood that cut deeper than any stranger's scorn. But even that profound grief was now intertwined with a fierce determination. As the afternoon waned, the light began to fade, casting long, distorted shadows across the now desolate homestead. The empty windows of the house stared back at us like vacant eyes. We were still outside, still cold, still exhausted, but something fundamental had shifted within us. The initial shock and humiliation continued to gather what we could, drying the few salvageable photographs, tucking them into the journal. This journal would be our voice, our witness, our story, etched in betrayal. Orson murmured, his voice firm, his gaze fixed on the house, would become a testament to the unyielding spirit of two brothers, forever bound, forever fighting. Silas nodded, a profound sense of purpose settling over our shared being. The pain in our bodies was still present, a dull throb, a constant companion, but it was now a backdrop to a fiercer, more powerful emotion. We were no longer just victims. We were witnesses, and we were determined to make our testimony heard. The rustic leather journal, now filled with the first painful entries of our ordeal, felt like a sacred trust. We knew the path ahead would be long and arduous, fraught with more pain and more struggle. But as we sat there, huddled together on the porch of our lost home, the chilling October wind whipping around us, we also knew that we would not walk it alone. We would walk it together as we always had, each step a testament to our unbreakable bond and our unyielding spirit. Our voices, once silenced by scorn, would now echo with a strength forged in fire, telling a story that demanded to be heard, a story of two brothers who, despite everything, refused to be broken. Our narrative would not end here, abandoned and forgotten. It would begin anew, a testament to endurance, a searing indictment of heartless abandonment, and a beacon for all who had ever been dismissed and cast aside. We would make sure of that. Like this video? Like and subscribe for more.